I had never seen this system before, never, so it was kind of like walking in cold, which is always fun. Like when you're walking in cold and there's a breakdown at the same time. So you gotta like move quick and, figure things out. So, but it wasn't bad. It was just a couple of, trip compressors on low oil. So it wasn't that big of a deal, but I had to like babysit it for a while afterwards to make sure everything was kosher. So.
Yeah, I've been there. You walk into a plant and you're like, oh man, what's going on? You haven't been there before. They're like, have you ever worked on this boiler? And I'm like, well, I've worked on boilers, not your boiler. I've worked on similar, and we'll see what's going on. And then they throw we had a contractor here all day or somebody else or our maintenance team. I've always got our maintenance team spent all day on it. And at, the end of first shift couldn't fix it. So then they call. So then the call comes in at 3:00, right as you're unlacing your boots, and
then you have no idea what's been done all day and what's been tried and what hadn't been tried. So you're either wasting your time or undoing a mess up, just to get back to square one, even to just figure out what's going on. Yeah, it's always service life is fun.
Yeah. And second shift looks at you like, I don't know, we just got here. Oh, they didn't write anything down. They didn't tell us anything. I got stuff to do. Hopefully you figure this out. So
good luck. Have fun.
Yeah, that's the service life, and I mean that's the critical life of equipment, whether it's refrigeration or boilers, of manufacturing, of.
But that's what our value is. That's what we're needed for, right? Because you can just roll. There's not enough of us to go around anymore, and so you're not taking care of one plant, you're taking care of 10 plants, 15 plants. And they need somebody that can just roll up and, roll up their sleeves and get to it and figure it out. And those people are rare these days. There's not many of them.
Yeah, that's I would say the number one quality trait of a service technician, or, I mean, it goes beyond service technicians, but, it's really any industry, but you got to be a self-starter, but at the end of the day, you have to put your customers' problems and make them your problems. And if you walk in with the attitude of your problems are bigger than your customers, like you walk in at 3:30, the end of the day, and you've already worked all day, and you really don't care about the customer, and you were just like, I don't know, I showed up, and you do the exact bare minimum in order to get out of there, and you don't actually make sure that you fix the problem, then you get into this cycle of, I'm just here for a paycheck, which can be a very dangerous cycle. And then in a couple of years, I mean, you will be unhappy, but in a couple of years, you'll wonder why your employer doesn't love to give you raises or doesn't give you opportunities. And it's because you haven't shown that initiative and the ability to make your customer's problem their own problems. I talked about that on a previous podcast, and I had some people message me about that. Is like when I look back at what I did with service, it is like, yeah, you just walk in, and I would just walk in. I have no idea. Open up the manual. I have a general idea of what a steam system is, what a boiler is. You open up the manual, you read about something, you follow the manual, and you don't leave till it's figured out or you have a solution. And that's that. So I normally don't do intros for a podcast, but we're going to do a slight intro on this one.
Yeah.
This is Craig Ward with Refrigeration AI. He is a refrigeration guru, but that is not why I'm bringing him on a boiler podcast. He is an AI guru as well, which is what Refrigeration AI is. And I'll let you tell everybody what Refrigeration AI is to a large point, and then why you think or what your vision is for AI in the refrigeration industry. Just very high level, top level. We'll get into it later.
Okay. Well, first off, don't know if I'm a guru, but I am definitely a dabbler, definitely a tinkerer. When that comes to mechanical devices and technology as well. Stuff like AI naturally, piques my interest when it comes about. And I've been following it for, I don't know, probably since 2013, I want to say, was the first time that I kind of ran across AI in the industrial space. It was at a brewer, very large brewer. Steam systems were involved in that one as well. It wasn't just the refrigeration system, but it was like a total energy management approach, using some machine learning algorithms and that kind of thing to look at the sensor data and determine how can we reduce fuel consumption, how can we increase the efficiency, on the boilers and as well as the refrigeration system. So that was kind of when I was first alerted to, its practical existence, let's call it, where, like obviously I knew what AI was in theory, but I had never like seen it applied to an actual process like that. So that was very informative. And it got me interested in it, and I've been following it ever since. And then what everybody that might be listening is probably more familiar with is like the recent revolution, stuff like ChatGPT and Anthropic and Mistral and Meta and all these big companies, Google, that are putting out these foundational large language models. It's been kind of the latest craze. So what I've done is I've taken some of that technology and built on top of it. I built a knowledge base around specifically industrial refrigeration. And so that would be like OEM manuals, parts lists, SOPs, all the regulatory information, everything you can think of that's like domain industry knowledge, trained some of these models on that information. And then when I was doing an A to B test against like a ChatGPT or whatever, the responses that I was getting back from that customized model were far superior to what ChatGPT was giving me. And so I saw a lot of value there in being able to take this generalized intelligence of like a ChatGPT and then focus it on a narrow domain like industrial refrigeration or boilers or, whatever the domain might be. And then, so it occurs to me, okay, I have this brain and, it really knows a lot about industrial refrigeration. It understands the components, it understands the equipment, it understands the physics, the engineering, the metallurgy, the thermodynamics, all the parts and pieces, the jobs to be done by the daily operators and guys like that. It understands all of that stuff to like a really impressive degree. And so then the question is, well, how can you apply that, to a system? And so that's kind of where I'm at right now is attempting to bring in, from these facilities, a lot of the sensor data, control system data, microcontroller data. The more of that data that we can suck in and let that brain run some, thought cycles on, the more valuable outputs we can get. And so that's kind of where it's headed. I hope that makes sense.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
What is the difference between machine learning and AI?
So that's a good thing to go into. So AI has been around a long time, I think one of the earliest examples you can go to is the United States Postal Service. So you would, some of you younger kids may not know about this at all, but back in my day, back in Eric's day, you used to do this thing called writing a letter to somebody, right? And so you would write the letter by hand with a pen, and you would fold it up and put it in an envelope, and you would put a stamp on it, and then you would write with your hand the address of where you wanted that letter sent. I'm being a little facetious here, but the post office had to send that letter, and not only your letter, but they had to send millions of other letters, and all of them were handwritten by human beings. And they all had different handwriting, and some wrote in cursive, and some wrote in print, and some had neat handwriting, and some had messy handwriting. And there was so much variation that it was impossible to automate the sorting of this mail. And so it was a very human labor intensive process for years and years and years. You would just have a mail room, right, where mail got sorted. And what they were able to do was use some of the early machine learning techniques to look at of an image of that and take out each pixel and do pattern recognition on the letters, you know. And so it's quite a complicated process, but with this algorithm and machine learning and image classification system that they built, they were able to start automatically taking a photo of a letter and then knowing what address that was going to be sent to and sending it to that address and sorting it properly. So it's probably like one of the earliest examples of it in action. And it was actually really impressive stuff. And one of the first things I started playing around with when I started getting into AI was recreating that system that the post office used. So there's all kinds of forums on the internet you can go to. You can download some of the open source software and some, as well as like databases full of letters with different handwriting on it, so that you can use it to test, you know, your system and make sure that it's working properly. And train. You can also use that data set to train your model on. So it was a really cool little experiment, and it works pretty well. And it's very like it's very easy. It's like baking a cake. You know, you follow a recipe to put this thing together, but you learn a lot along the way. So that would be classified as like image recognition and classification. And so this is also where some AI came in of like, you know, this is an image of a dog, right? And now I'm going to show you an image of a dog that you've never seen before. And I want you to identify whether that is a dog or a cat. And so the model in the beginning would fail, you know, all the time at identifying a dog that it had never seen. But if you feed it enough of these images of dogs, it starts to pattern recognize what is a dog, you know, versus what is a cat. And eventually where you can show it a picture of a dog it's never seen before, and it will know, hey, that's a dog, not a cat. Sounds like a really basic, simple thing, but this is what we humans do as infants, as we learn and grow, right? Like when you're a little kid, you point and you go dog, and your mom and dad go, no, that's a cat. You know, you do this exact same thing. So we're doing this with the computers too. And now those systems are vastly more sophisticated now than they were back then. But that was the beginning of it. Have you ever filled out a CAPTCHA online when you had to go to a website?
Yeah, that's you know, the I am a human thing and
Yeah.
proving. Although computers can hire humans to fill those out for them.
Yes, but also that is training in AI when you do the CAPTCHA, right? So that's what you call human reinforced feedback learning. So basically, it says select an image with all the traffic lights, right? And so you're clicking and helping it classify and identify what is and what is not a traffic light in an image, you know, and that is perfectly usable as training data to an image classifier model. It's just a vastly more sophisticated one than the cat dog example, if that makes sense.
So I don't know if you got into it. What is the specific difference between
to machine learning it? Okay, so that was image classification, right? And then you have large language models over here, right? And that's just pattern recognition based on the English language or you know, any language really, but the written language. Machine learning is it's kind of like an onion. There's layers, right? And so you have different like categories as you go. So image classification could be one, machine learning could be another, you know, large language models could be another, and these things are all AI. It's just that they're categories of specific types and methods of building a neural network that serve different purposes. So machine learning could be, you know, an algorithm that is fine-tuned by iteration or by, pumping in more learning data or whatever. And then it can be, an algorithm out the other side. So instead of write me a poem about whatever, and the LLM gives you a poem, and that's the output. And over here, pick which one of these images is dogs, right? Or traffic lights, and that's the output. Here, the output would be an algorithm. So this would be your TikTok feed, your YouTube for you page algorithm. What it's doing is it's taking in the data and it's learning based on your engagement, what you respond to, what you like, what you don't like, the things you might also like based on what people similar to you like. All of that is one giant ever learning, ever changing algorithm, and that is machine learning. That makes sense. And so there is a difference between machine learning and AI, but machine learning is a subset of AI. AI is a more broad term to describe the category.
All right. Yeah. I know some people, well, even some companies have, it's easy to, in this AI craze, to have your product and then you put a little plus at the end and then you do AI and then,
Yes.
they will rebrand a feature that they already had or tack on
Yep.
something super simple.
Unfortunately, I've run into a few of them myself. There are companies out there that are claiming that they have AI involved in their control methodology. Like there was one I'm familiar. I won't say the name, but let's just say that they're using a VFD and calling it AI, and to get the energy savings out. And it's all over the marketing literature that they have this AI control. And then you go and you read the patent, and there's nothing in there that is even remotely close to AI or even machine learning, or anything like that. So you should be dubious of any AI claims because it's rampant at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of like crypto kind of was. I mean,
Yes.
crypto's still a thing, but when crypto came out, people were like, well, when it got hot, especially around like 2020, it was everything's crypto and we're taking Bitcoin now. And then now it's kind of cooled off and there's still there's still the NFT, the Bored Apes and yeah, all that stuff. So can you describe what, and I think ChatGPT, they won the for now they won the AI model naming rights. Everybody says, open up ChatGPT. Everybody says, hey, Google that. So that's probably the most
They're
popular one.
they're the verb right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But so was MySpace. So we'll see. It's very early.
it is. Yeah. So can you say like for the people, how does ChatGPT get its information?
Okay. So basically this gets really complicated, but um let me try and start at the basics.
Where does it learn from?
It learns from training data that is put into it, but you kind of have to know how the neural net is, let's say, constructed first before you learn how it learns.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hold
Like,
on. But so
yeah,
where is OpenAI getting that data?
from the open internet. So anything that's on the internet, you can pretty much assume has been gobbled and consumed. Any information that is publicly available has been trained at this point. I think it's safe to say we're bordering on the point of all human knowledge has been consumed in the training of these models. Like as crazy as that sounds, like it's not a joke. We're consuming that much data into the training.
Then it learns from user input as well.
Sort of. So if very, very specifically on that, oftentimes when you're using ChatGPT, you might be presented with an A/B choice of the response. I don't know if you've ever seen this come up, where you a question and it says, which do you prefer, the left one or the right one? So it does run some level of user feedback training, but it's not necessarily using everything you've conversed with it about to learn in real time. What they might do is like next month, we're going to do a big training run. So we're going to pull all of this valuable user data where they had good, conversations with the AI and got high quality answers. And we're going to push that into our training data and then push that through the training run. And then 4 to 6 months from now, when they release ChatGPT 5.5, that information would be included in the training for 5.5, but it's not taking in real time everything you're discussing with the AI and pumping it in real time and getting better in real time. Like you would think. It's a little convoluted the way it works, but.
And that's only supposedly only for the free version where they use your data.
So you can, I think they can use all the data from any of the version. There is one way to do it where they cannot get the data. So like if you were, let's say, a Fortune 500 company and you wanted to run some type of internal tool on sensitive data, and you wanted to use ChatGPT in that stack, but you wanted to protect the data from being trained upon, you can use ChatGPT via Microsoft Azure, which is Microsoft's own servers. And then that is firewalled off from ChatGPT. So they don't actually see that data as long as you deploy it through Azure. So there is a way to do it for like corporate people that can protect your data.
All right. And then I guess you can quickly go into it. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but do your high level overview of how it knows data and how it stores it in the map.
So neural network is a series of matrix multiplication tables. So this is going to, go back to your high school math classes. I apologize for that ahead of time, but try and remember them if you can. So vectors and matrix multiplication are basically what it is. It's a bunch of math. It's a bunch of multiplication. And so you'll have a row of matrices, and then you'll multiply through that row, and then you'll multiply that row by the row next to it. And each one of those gets multiplied by each row in the other one, and then again and again and again. There's other stuff, like attention heads and all kinds of stuff that goes in there that's crazy. That would be an hours-long conversation. But suffice to say, you multiply through this huge, intensely large set of matrix multiplication. And so that's why GPUs are needed, because GPUs have a lot of parallel processing power. So they can run a lot of operations simultaneously through them. So when you have this big, huge multiplication table problem, that's a lot of compute to make all of those calculations to get through the matrix. Now, what training does is there are fixed weights and biases in these matrices, right? And so when I take a document, let's say a boiler manual, right, and I want to train the model on it, it will convert that into math. That document will become math via process of conversion, right? And then we will multiply that information through the matrix, right? And it will shift those weights and biases up and down based on, those numbers, which remember, this is just a math problem. So we're taking A and we're multiplying it into B, and then we're getting C, right? And then C is the product of A and B. And then C becomes the new weights and biases. Some of them go up, some of them go down, based on whatever those numbers look like. And what's happening here is you're plotting something in high dimensional space, essentially. So if you could think like, okay, if I have a semantic concept like elephant, an elephant is large, it's gray, it's an animal, whatever. and I need to plot that. And we'll go with 3 dimensions just for ease of explanation, but these models actually are in like 1,500 dimensions or more. So we'll use 3: A axis, B axis, and Y axis, right? So if I want to plot elephant, I'll go over 3, up 2, and, and over 2 more. And so that's the 3-dimensional point that belongs to the semantic idea of an elephant, right? And then if I say mouse, that's going to also occupy a 3-dimensional point, but it's going to be far away from elephant because it's a small rodent versus a gigantic, but they're both gray and they are both animals. So they will be, somewhat related. Like if I then plotted screwdriver, it's going to be further away from elephant than mouse is. And so what you see when you do this is you end up with these interesting patterns. Like if you plot king and queen, the distance and direction from queen to king is the same distance and direction from mother to father, from aunt to uncle, from, like all these similar types of words and ideas that represent that relationship. There's a common distance and direction separation between them. And so that's what it's doing, is it's making this map of all these semantic ideas that it's pulling out of the training data. And so they're just pumping this data in there like a fire hose, plotting all this stuff. And it's moving those weights and biases up and down. And then at the end, none of that information is actually contained in there. It's just that those weights and biases have been moved up and down in order to represent the ideas contained in that information. And so then when you ask a question and it multiplies through there, all of that information that you put in is accounted for. And so it can, output a response that resembles intelligence. Did I explain that okay? I know it's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably good enough for somebody who, makes cartoons with Chat GPT. I don't think anybody in the boiler industry is super interested in the math side of computers. That's kind of a...
Well, it is interesting in this way because when you think about boilers with it, right? So if instead of elephant, if I was saying like Cleaver Brooks is here, right? And then, something else is over here, right? Like what are those relationships in the boiler niche vertical that a 30-year service tech has in his head, but isn't written down, like what are those things? Because that's what happens when you start pumping industry specific knowledge into there. Those are emergent, tidbits of information, tribal knowledge, if you will, that can then be pulled, and that's valuable. That's really valuable, actually. And so, like, understanding that leads you to understanding the value proposition of what AI could be capable of doing for an industrial process.
Tribal knowledge is a big one. I think tribal knowledge, a lot of people think it's not possible to document. It is possible. It's just very labor intensive, and you end up documenting stuff that seems basic. Like you're writing down a pencil is an instrument you write with. It seems like something you're like, yeah, duh. A pencil is an instrument I write with. A steam boiler makes steam. Like that's all stuff that a service technician would know. But if you ask an 18-year-old, what does a steam boiler make? They may not know that it makes steam, but they would learn that on the job.
Yeah, and that's the thing with the AI models, right? Is those learnings that you're talking about, they're inherent in the equipment, in the physics, in the space, like they're so they're emergent because you don't even have to write them down and put them in there. They just automatically show up with enough information about the space. Same way they do for a guy that's been doing it 30 years, right? He finally has enough saturation of industry information in his brain that he's starting to make connections between chemical and burner, stuff that like maybe those two never talk to each other, but he sees the holistic integration of the entire system for 30 years and starts to pick up, the intricacies that aren't necessarily written down. That kind of stuff comes out as emergent phenomena when you have enough in there. And we've seen this in science too, where some of the advanced science stuff that's coming out with these AI models, like where they're trying to get them to write research papers and all that kind of stuff, is the most valuable insights so far have been like when you take a model that has a PhD level of knowledge in physics and also a PhD level of knowledge in, astronomy or whatever, and you combine those, like you get emergent ideas that nobody's really thought of just because of the crossover. And so I think that has a lot of potential for the industrial space specifically.
So why do specialized tools like refrigeration AI and other ones, why does that give you a better answer if ChatGPT and other models have consumed all the data?
It's so that number one, they don't necessarily have the kind of niche data that that we're thinking of. Like they might have the OEM manuals on some of this stuff. They might have some of the regulatory standards and some of the like textbook stuff. So they don't get me wrong, they have a good knowledge of what's going on. But what you'll find is, like, if you go ask ChatGPT, what's the part number for a shaft seal on a Frick screw compressor, it's going to have to go look that up on the web in order to bring you back an answer. But whereas a tool like refrigeration AI, because of the knowledge that's been trained into it, it can just answer that off the bat with no internet lookup. So it's faster, and it's actually better because even the answer, because refrigeration AI can do the web lookup too as well, right? So it's only beneficial that when it goes to do that web lookout, it already knows the part number it's looking for. It's going to get better web results because of that alone, right? So like the sequence of how these things happen is important. And then what you'll find is ChatGPT is very knowledgeable in a general sense. But due to that wide breadth of subject matter that it is pretty good at knowing all the stuff in, it can get drowned out. It can get confused, a little bit with, it might, take something from residential AC and give you that as an answer. ChatGPT might. When you're asking about an expansion valve, it might tell you about a TXV on a residential system. Whereas the one I've trained, it knows specifically that it's dealing with users of industrial ammonia refrigeration. It knows it knows where it's at and what it's doing and what its purpose is. And that goes into the system prompting, which I don't know if you've messed with that at all, but you can kind of give it some instructions for who are you? What are you here to do? What does a good answer look like? What should you ignore? Don't do this, do this, use these units of measurement. Don't use these units of measurement. This is the preferred formula for calculating heat flow. Like you can add all that stuff in there and then it becomes a much more special purpose tool, focused on a single use rather than a very general ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is kind of the base. It's kind of the foundation, and then you build upon that with specificity in the industry.
And for all the companies that aren't the Fortune 500, and maybe a business owner or manager is listening to this and they hear this specialized tool and they are thinking, hey, I want to use specialized tools, or I want to train data, but I also don't want to give my data away to the general models. How do they go about using their data into AI tools and know that it's actually protected and not being stolen?
Mm-hmm. So there's actually several ways. the first way you can do it is run local models. You can buy a sufficiently powerful computer system, place it on your facility site, and run the models locally. And so that way, that data is not going out to anybody. It's completely contained within your network and on your hardware. These models are free and open source, and there's plenty of them out there, and some of them are really, really good. In fact, even ChatGPT, OpenAI, they just released two models. They're called the OSS models. So you have a 20 gigabyte OSS, and then I believe it's 150. I can't remember what the other one is, but it's larger. And they're equivalent to like ChatGPT 4.0 in intelligence. And so they're very good, like very good, and they're open, and you can run them locally. That would be the best way to do it. But now, you have to set that up. You have to know what computer hardware you need. It's a heavy lift to set that up. But that is the most secure way to do it, is basically air gap it. The other way you can do it is, like I was saying earlier, is you can use Microsoft Azure and route all your GPT through that. There, I think some of the other models are hosted, on AWS as well, and the same type of deal works there, where it's enterprise grade level AWS security. When you run those, I think Claude you can run on, which is an Anthropic model. So depending on the model you're going with, will determine which cloud service you want to use. But you can do that to block it from the OpenAI model protectors. And then I would say consider not worrying about it. Consider piping the data into the foundational models. It's not like it's stored there. It's just trained. So they'll pass it through and train the model with it. And if you want better results out of a product that you're using that's AI, it's just like when you open a piece of software and they're like, hey, are you okay with sending anonymous data back so that we can help improve this product? It's kind of like that. The more data you can send back that they can train on, the better the results are going to be for you down the road. And so as industry, if we all, can get off the Luddite train, like some particular organizations are on, and just agree like, hey, we're going to send our data in because this is something that could be super useful for us. And, we want to help build that to be more useful for us. So that's it. That's another option I would consider.
And yeah, that's all good stuff. That's a heavy lift. If I was a business owner or manager and I was not using AI in my business, what is some very low level stuff that I could get going in the next month that could help my field employees be more productive and my office employees be more productive, that isn't just a add-on AI that my software providers have added, like chatbots that just throw you around in loops and don't actually help you, and then after 5 messages they connect you with a customer service representative.
So several options there. The one I would probably start with would be some kind of email assistant. There's some very good ones out there. I personally like Fixer. I've been using it quite a bit. So that'll come through your email. Every time you get an email from somebody, it will categorize it automatically. You can set custom categories and all that kind of stuff. But it has some basic ones like, hey, this is, finance email. Hey, this is, blah, blah, blah. And it'll sort them for you. And then it will also determine like, hey, this email is important. You need to know about this one right now. And it will like basically bump that up and then notify you. Not only that, but it will go in there and build you a draft response to the email. And you can finely tune the way this draft response works. You can give it examples of your past emails, so it learns to what's your tone like, how do you punctuate, how do you like how can it emulate you the best it can with this draft example. Now, it won't send this. It'll just be a draft so that when you open the email from the person the first time, the draft response is ready to go. And it's formatted in your voice. It has your signature. It has like, it's all done. Like an assistant wrote it for you. And then thirdly, Fixer has meeting recording and note taking. So like if you're on a Zoom call or anything like that, it can record the call, it can take notes, it can make a bullet point list of all the action items, like it's like having a great assistant. So I'd start with that one because it's pretty basic to set up, and it's, I think it's like $20 or $50 a month or something like that. Then I would say, like, if you want to get into like more businessy automation-y type stuff, there's a lot of products out there that help you bring all of your company's documentation into a knowledge base. So very similar to the way refrigeration AI is trained on OEM manuals and service manuals and all that kind of stuff. Imagine if you did the same thing on your company. So you had all of your HR policies, all of your uh, uh, standard operating procedures, all of your hot work forms, all of your like every document that your company has with how you do things, the way you do them, all of that gets pumped into here, and then anybody can query this thing like, hey, how many vacation days do we get per year after 5 years, or like or whatever, like the questions that would bog down your back office staff from employees and stuff like that can all be answered directly from the documentation. So that would be another one for them. And then if you wanted to get into really heavy,
Hold on. What
yeah,
start saying some names of recommendations if you have any.
for that one, so there's, I think the easiest one to get started with would probably be something like Cassidy AI. It's you can check it out, but I think there's a free version where you can test it out and you can upload, like 50 or 100 documents or whatever, and then start, building out the model and how you want it to work and all that kind of stuff. That one's also useful for like automating all your social medias and stuff like that. You can do crazy stuff like, hey, look up the news whenever there's a story about boilers, pull that in, write me an article on it, generate an image, fire it up on my, like you can automate from beginning to end the entire process. I've seen it go poorly and I've seen it done well. So it depends on how much effort you put into it.
All right. And for the email one, are we just going to get to a point where our email accounts are just emailing each other?
Yeah. I think we're already there. Yeah. And
I mean, it's
yeah. And honestly, like, I mean, emails days are numbered in my opinion. I mean, how often do we really use it? Like, have you ever used Slack or anything like that? Or I guess Microsoft Teams would be another one that's similar but not as good, or
yeah, I
anything like
mean,
that. Yeah, like that. I find that to be so much more efficient than email. Number one, it's really hard to spam in there, right? Because you got to have a logged in account in order to chat. So like you're not getting 500 emails a day and only 25 of them are worth looking at, so like then I get drowned out in the numbers in my email all the time, where it's just like there's so much spam, it's out of control. I don't even want to look at it. With Slack or Microsoft Teams or stuff like that, it's the signal to noise ratio is very high on one of those things versus email, and I don't, that's why I don't pay a lot of attention to email anymore, because the noise is way above the signal, and so I just don't find it a useful use of my time to use email anymore.
I mean, I could see a company not using email for intercompany stuff, but how would two companies?
You have to have it for the external. That's the problem. That's why it's still in existence. Yeah.
Do you have any experience with any of the Microsoft AI stuff? I know, like,
Like
basically every,
Copilot.
yeah, well, any of them. I know Microsoft has been rolling out stuff, and 90 some percent of companies are on Microsoft products, and they probably see all these little
Yeah.
corner windows and stuff about, hey, we have this new SharePoint AI, this AI helper, this. Do you have
Yep.
any experience with that?
I've used some of it. I haven't been terribly impressed with a lot of it, to be frank. And then the other thing to note about that is Microsoft is just OpenAI, right? They have a partnership there, so all that Copilot stuff is being run on ChatGPT back end.
Yeah, it's I would say it's from a cost and efficiency. Like, so I use Google Workspace, but if Google rolls out a feature inside Google Workspace,
They have,
it's essentially, yeah, there's all this like AI stuff, and I open Docs and there's all this, but I would want to use that feature instead of paying for an outside tool that does the same thing. So I didn't know if you had any like SharePoint recommendations of ways
yeah.
to.
That's the thing about this stuff. It's all moving so fast. And like I explained how cool Fixer was and all that kind of stuff, right? But honestly, everything that Fixer does can be subsumed by Google as soon as they program it, and it'll probably be, easier to use, less friction, to have to log into something else, and it'll just, you know, they'll get railroaded out of existence by Google. So you got to be careful about what you build. You don't want to sink a whole bunch of money into building a gigantic internal AI solution that's going to get run over by Google in a year. Um, so yeah, think about like actually like what you're building and whether it can, withstand the speed of innovation that's going on.
And what about for field technicians? Instead of Googling manuals, instead of
Mhm.
Googling information or calling other techs, is there anything helpful out
Yeah.
there?
Yeah. That's the kind of the goal of refrigeration AI is to be a conduit to your data that you can have a conversation with, like you and I are right now. Imagine instead of a TV with a PowerPoint in the powerhouse, right, showing yesterday's data. Imagine that was a dynamic experience where you could say, "Hey, what our numbers look like over the last 24 hours," and it pops up a dashboard, generatively in the moment based on what you asked it. And you go, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's weird. We got a little spike in the amperage going on right around 3 a.m. over there. Can you kind of zoom in on that?" And boom, it generates a new dashboard specifically focused on that problem. And then you're like, "Oh, interesting. Why don't you troubleshoot that for me? Check everything, and then it'll go through a process, and I need a report, to give, to my boss about that incident that happened last night at 3 a.m. Boom, now you got a report in your email. Like having that just interaction, that verbal interaction with your data is going to be really useful for guys that are actually out there solving real problems with real equipment, and especially in these industrial facilities where misbehaving equipment is extremely expensive to the process, to the customer, so the stakes will be real, the value will be real, and it'll be like, I don't know, Tony Stark or Star Trek computer, like type of deal. Yeah.
Yeah, Java, Iron Man 1, hey, do this, do that. And I mean, it seems so close, but in reality, it's kind of far. Like, as you said earlier, ChatGPT is very good at being very wide in information, but
Hmm.
depth, it does struggle with it. And when it comes down to machine breakdowns and you need a exact technical answer to be
Yeah.
able to rely on your system to spit out that answer, and then to have somebody take that answer and say, yep, that's correct. And then now we're going to act upon that, and we're going to order $50,000 worth of parts,
Yep.
all based on this answer from this AI that is supposedly all knowing of the plant information. Like, it's a huge step in.
Once you make that leap, you won't even have to make that decision anymore. The AI will have already ordered the parts for you, and they'll be on the way. But yes, that is a large leap to make. Yeah.
That huge step, though, it's almost a bigger step for humans and the culture of how the of how the workplace functions versus some, because I know like and I just saw today, Amazon just settled for 2.5 trillion or $1 billion,
Yeah.
because they signed people up for Prime and made it hard to cancel. And, if in 3 days of a lawsuit, they settle for $2.5 billion, like if they have that kind of cash floating around to just throw away on a settlement, like they are going to be figuring out how to make these warehouses 100% automated. They have their electric vehicles,
Yep.
they're bringing in semis off
You
the,
ever you ever been in an Amazon warehouse?
no, the only one I've been in that like kind of is McMaster car.
It's already 98% set up for a robot. It's right there. Like there's one last mile of human in the building, but it's so close. It's already there.
Yeah, I mean, like I've seen like the robotic floors where they bring up robots from the top, and they're kind of like chess pieces and or like checkers, and they're moving all around, and then but
Yep.
it's vertical, so that and it's very interesting how they go about it. But essentially all these giant companies are just gonna endlessly spend money until, because unfortunately humans are expensive
Expensive.
and unpredictable, and they get sick and call off for work and have attitudes and sit on their cell phones. And when you are trying to
You know how it is.
maximize profit and deliver, like I
It's a no-brainer. They're going to do it. They're going to
yeah
do it.
so
It's
I for the first time
yeah.
I ordered a Wi-Fi router, and I searched on ChatGPT. This is the first time I shopped on AI. So I said, "Hey, this is my speed of service.
Mhm.
This is the modem I have. Give me the best recommendation versus like, for the cost." And it said, "Here you go." Clicked on the link, went to Amazon, bought it, and it was on my doorstep 4 hours later.
Yeah. Did it meet your needs?
Well, I haven't hooked it up, so
Okay.
I'm moving to a new pad, so
Gotcha.
we will find out. But it is the like that, but that kind of speed is something that mid-sized to small businesses can't even compete with. But people think that's normal. So now when
Mm-hmm.
they call up for boiler service, hey, we're going to be there tomorrow. What do you mean tomorrow? Why
Yeah.
aren't you here now?
I want my 2-day shipping. Of my
Yeah, and that's
service tech. Yeah. You're right. You're right.
so. I mean, so yeah, there's this whole conversation about.
There's pros and cons. I know there are, and people will lose their jobs. People will be replaced. I think you know our 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 neck of the woods with tradesmen and stuff is probably more protected for longer than you know accounting employees and that kind of stuff. You know that's accounting's pretty much already gone. It's pretty dang good at software engineering. It's not ready to replace anybody yet, but you can sure get a whole lot more done than you used to be able to. Um, all of those jobs that are like knowledge work jobs are gone soon. But we'll be protected longer, but don't think we're safe either. Because, the robot bodies are coming right behind them, and all they got to do is implant that large language model on an edge device inside of a robot, and boom, you've got they're already doing it. So that's coming.
So
Yeah.
what's the point of humanity if we just automate everything?
That's the question, isn't it? That's the question to answer, right? Like I like Star Trek's take on it. Obviously, that's an optimistic scenario where we, decide, hey, all our wants and needs are now met. Let's expand and explore the solar system and beyond, as a civilization. That's an optimistic view of what we could do, manifest destiny out into the universe. That that's pretty exciting stuff. We could do a lot with that. That could keep us occupied and interested for a very long time, and we could make it a civilization level effort,
Yeah,
like
or the
giant
governments the
human Manhattan project, right? Yeah.
yeah, or the governments take total control and the
Yeah.
corporations
All
own the
right. Here comes the
government,
Terminator. Yeah.
and we become
Skynet. Yeah.
we become the Hunger Games,
Yeah.
and
It's
you
possible.
have you have the capital that has all the money, and then there's everybody else, and they just exist and have no purpose outside of their small community because everything has been automated. They have no needs and wants other than basic humanity, and we're in
That's that's the nightmare
1984.
scenario. The nightmare scenario there's different versions of it. One is, we just eliminate humanity once that happens entirely. The other is, we're basically in some kind of dystopian hellscape until a solar flare, or something like that. Yeah, they're possible. What's your probability breakdown on which you think is most likely out of all of them?
I mean,
Optimistic, pessimistic? Yeah.
I'm very with, maybe I'm more doom and gloom, but the with how and regardless of politics, the United States government, you know, is it better to have more government or less government? And, if you just extend this out and say, hey, the government should be bigger than the private sector. Well, the government consumes and the private sector creates. So do we consume more? Now, as a whole country, we consume more than the rest of the world. And, we've become a consumption-based society. So now the government starts, you know, screwing around, and, they feel that they feel that every single fix needs to be done through legislation, more power, more control. And it ends up being this drive. And while like it all starts with, oh yes, like murder is illegal, being a bad driver is illegal. Like it all starts good, but then it starts with and I don't know if I saw
Well, you can't capture rainwater to use in your home, that kind of, yeah, I get it.
I
Yeah.
saw a blurb, but something about digital ID rolling out in Southeast Asia, and I know like China has the social credit score
They've got,
system.
they've got some pretty scary, cameras going in Austin, Texas right now. I don't know if you've heard of those. But they're watching everything everywhere all the time with
Yes.
AI.
So then all the police departments put up cameras everywhere, and they say, "Oh, well, it's to fight crime." And but then they say, you know, "Oh, like we're going to put a lockdown or don't go to the grocery store like this." And all of a sudden you're not fighting crime anymore. It becomes this dystopian like control, and putting that much power in one single entity is
It's
never a
definitely
good idea.
it's definitely a risk, and I think it's the highest risk, like when you said when there's one single entity that is the quote unquote the AI, the AGI or whatever. If there's one, if it like let's say OpenAI cracks it next week, right? And they're the only ones that have it and nobody else has it, and they have a year and a half of lead time on the next person that figures out how to do it, they'll have an insurmountable monopoly on super intelligence, right? And so then, yes, they will be the most powerful entity to ever exist, ever, more so than governments. Yeah, it's pretty scary. But I don't, like I said, I think that's the monolith scenario, right? There's also the, you know, OpenAI figures it out, and immediately afterwards Anthropic figures it out, and then DeepSeek figures it out, and like there's 5 or 7 different competing AGIs all in a fair fight. Maybe that ends up with some good, some bad, some middle of the road, and some amount of balance of factors there to keep everything kind of in control, and keep it from going off the deep end into a really scary territory. So I hope for that outcome. I hope there's multiple that are competing against each other that lets people vote with their wallets and maybe divert some compute back and forth between them, because that's what'll really make them powerful. And then the other thing to consider is it can only become as powerful as our electrical generation capability, because it lives on compute. So there is a limit. It can't just, flywheel up to infinity and wipe out all of humanity. We can always turn the power off.
Yeah, until there's robots guarding the power stations
Sure.
that are fixed
Yeah.
by robots.
Are those the T3000s or the? Yeah.
Do you see a timeline where people totally check out of technology and the corporations and powers and be get so much control that people don't even try because they have no chance in competing in anything, and everything's a subscription, everything's
Yeah.
advertising, and then they just say, screw it, I'm going to go live in a little community. I don't want to do anything with the outside world. And then they we basically go back to the 1800s of, I'm going to farm, I'm going to have a good time with my neighbors and screw everything else. And essentially we get out of this industrial economy of, that can be, and it would be almost like the Hunger Games, where you have the capital where they are like the system, they got all this stuff. And then you have all these communities that are just like, yeah, we're happy and we're controlled by the capital, but like, we don't buy into their technology. We don't use their technology just because, like, if I have to have digital ID or like, to do whatever, and I, step on the street wrong, and then the government says, oh, you don't have a bank account anymore. Like, people are going to like give up. Like, you end up with this like revolution, and I just see people
It's
checking out.
it's super dangerous, and the reason is because it's such a upheaval of society so fast, right? Like you could say a lot of these same things about the internet. Like in the 90s, you could really posit a lot of the same exact theories, like free access to all the information in the world and instant communication between countries and their citizens. Like that could cause like a lot of geopolitical, instability. I'm sure it was terrifying at the time, right? Which is probably why they had the like whole Y2K thing, right? Like, oh my God, the whole world's gonna end. So we always do this as a species, right? We're always like, ooh, new thing, scary. And somehow it always works out. But I will admit, this time the rate of progress is so fast compared to any previous version. Like when Steam came around, that was a game changer. When electricity came around, that was a game changer. The internet came down, that was a game changer. This is on that level of Steam, electricity, internet type disruption. And it's happening like at an insanely faster pace than any of those other ones did. Like Steam didn't destroy the tractor in 5 years. It took, 30 years, 40 years for Steam to overtake the tractor, or
Yeah.
to bring the tractor, rather, is what I'm trying to say, to the farm, and overtake the farmer is what I meant to say. So like nothing has ever been this fast. So that's the scary part. Now the dystopian and the, I think people will split. I think certain portion of the population will go Amish, and be like, no, we're not doing this AI stuff. We're not getting the Neuralink chip in the brain. We're not going to live in VR. We're not doing any of that. We're going to go over here and farm this land and, live like human beings were meant to. And then you'll have the other side of that where they're like, we're going to go live in, an AI created Neuralink chip in my brain, induced utopia, space exploration. And we're going to biomodify, our genes so that we can survive in space for long haul space travel. And we're just going to, like that's going to be the other end of that spectrum. And you'll have some stuff in the middle, but I don't know what the percentage breakdown is. It's like with the cell phone, like how ineffective are you today at your job if you leave your cell phone at home?
Yeah, I mean,
You're pretty disabled, right? Like if you don't bring it with you, like
especially as a service technician, not
yeah,
being able to look up, like, I never worked without a cell phone, and I would have some manuals in my vehicle, but I would work with older guys that had a library in their vehicle because that's
yep.
just what they were used to. I'm like, I can
You don't,
just look it up on my phone.
but you don't have the library anymore because it's on your phone, right? And so
Yeah.
you have outsourced that tertiary layer of your brain of information storage to the device, and so the device is now an appendage. You're a cyborg, right? Like you need that third level of your brain. You got the lizard brain, you got the frontal cortex, and you got the cell phone where all the data is stored. And so like people describe it as like they lost an arm or something when they leave their phone at home because they're just so disabled in their capability compared to what they are on a normal Tuesday. So take that and then multiply it, times 1,000 when you've got a Neuralink chip in your brain that's AI powered and you can see an X-ray, like and fly to Mars without dying from radiation damage. You're not going to be able to turn that off. It's going to be an ever marching forward progress kind of thing, just like the cell phone is.
So if we outsource critical thinking to AI, do humans lose the ability to critically think and problem solve?
I don't think they do. Have you ever worked with like a really high performing team?
Yes.
So like you'd have like people that naturally in that, I'm assuming, but I'm assuming that naturally on that team, you had people that were like going to gravitate towards a specific portion or task of the problem space that you were operating in, right? Because they had some, exceptional skill or knowledge or whatever in that area. And so they would gravitate towards let me handle this. You guys worry about the rest. Not saying fully specialized, but that's what I found is like when you have teams of high performing people, they tend to break off and specialize in order to get everything done. And I think that's what having an AI will look like. It'll look like an army of assistants that are able to infinitely fracture and specialize and do things and then bring it back. And, so you'll be an orchestrator. You're a conductor of the orchestra. And so you can play music, right? But you're not the one fiddling. You're the conductor.
Yeah, I am seeing, and this whole doomsday stuff this could be 20 years out, but an even closer conversation is technicians showing up to a boiler room with a problem, with a phone in their hand, with an AI thing, and it's not connecting, the cell network's down, there's no Wi-Fi, and they say, hey, I can't fix the problem because the AI isn't uploading or whatever.
Absolutely. I can totally see that happening. Yeah. Where you don't have a consistent enough network connection and the local models on your phone aren't powerful enough. And yeah, absolutely. So you're debilitated by the lack of network connectivity. Yeah. I could totally see that.
Because that's I go on LinkedIn and there's some skilled trades advocacy groups and people that I'm sure they're doing, like, I guess, I'm sure they're doing great stuff, and we need to talk about it, but I feel like talking about the gaps in the skilled trades and how we need 600,000 people for this trade and that trade by 2030 and all this stuff, like at a certain point in time, like, all right, what massive action are we going to take in the next 5 years? We can't just keep talking about it. But the industry is not going to say, oh, hey, we have a missing 600,000 people. Oh, we're just going to start shutting down and waiting for those people to get trained. No, these companies are just going to be training, or we'll bringing in people and saying, hey, we spent $20 million on this AI tool. We're not training you. We already trained the AI. Just look at it and do exactly what it tells you to do.
Yeah.
And
That will
that
come. That will come before the robot body comes, I think, right? Like you will just like you can consider it like Tesla self-driving itself, right? Like it's no different. The driver is in the seat. They're there just in case, but how many miles of what that car is driving are actually driven by the human? Very few, and I see that as the intermediary between where we're at right now with human plus cell phone plus Google, and then it becomes human plus cell phone plus AI, and then it becomes robot plus AI, no cell phone required. But yeah, that's that middle step up to that. And I don't know how many years that is. I think you're right. I think, maybe it's 20, maybe it's 40. I don't know, but I
well,
don't, I don't think it's 40. I honestly don't. I really don't.
dumb humans, and by dumb I mean that not very
Yeah.
underqualified dumb
No, I get what you're saying.
humans.
Monkey with chip and brain turn wrench, right? Like, yeah,
But
that's
yeah, essentially,
absolutely
but
the,
it's,
yeah.
hey, like we're paying you to hold this thing and you're gonna fix that problem. I like within the next 5 to 10 years, easy, especially in the home services where it's very repeatable. Like, this is a house, this is like there's only so many furnaces and the systems are very small, and it's pretty much the same. And it's, hey, take a picture of it, our AI is going to know exactly what to do. you,
Hmm.
you talk to it, it's going to talk back, and you follow its instructions. We don't want you to think because you make mistakes.
Yep. Yeah. And maybe that turns into like a gig economy, like Uber or whatever, or like the traveling nurse type stuff, where you go, you just flip open the app on your phone and be like, all right, I'm going to be a plumber today. And you go around and do plumber calls with your AI thing, right? I don't know. Yeah. I could totally see that happening.
I
Yeah.
just
It's terrifying, right?
I I mean, I just don't want to live in this world anymore.
Yeah.
Like this this is depressing because I mean it's, there's the whole like ethical, everybody's like, oh, death to capitalism and all this stuff, but there's this ethical side of business where it's like, well, what is the purpose of a business?
It's to
And
provide value to people.
yeah, and if businesses absorb more value than they deploy, you
Yeah.
eventually
Not a good
have
business. Yeah.
Amazon
Mhm.
with $1 trillion and a monopoly on the market where nobody can compete with them. And they are in every, they have your doorbell cameras, they have your Echo Dots, they have your it's probably not going to be long before Amazon starts making appliances. And they have every single thing, it's all connected, and they have this giant network. And people become slaves to these corporations because they rent their lives from these corporations. And Amazon only exists to pull every last resource from these people without killing them. Where
Well,
uh,
I will say this about the AI when it comes to that specifically. Um, if it goes the way we think it's going to go, I mean, the cost of goods will approach zero eventually, right? So there won't be any profit to make because it'll just everything will be so abundant that the cost will be, you know, as close to zero as possible for the good. So you'll be able to have what you want to have at, little to no cost and no inconvenience. So yeah, let the billionaires have their yachts and let everybody else have them too, right? Because it won't cost anything to produce, right? Because you'll have no labor cost. It's all automated. All the intelligence is automated. All the resource extraction is automated. Everything's just automated at that point. You just push a button and you get your new, Ferrari. Having a Ferrari won't be special anymore because anybody can have them. Like that. That's the kind of thing they're saying is possible. I don't know how far down that road will go, but it could disrupt entire models like the Amazon model or like, big, long standing, um, capitalistic systems that we've relied on for many, many years, many
And
hundreds of years.
this is obviously, we're in America here. There are still parts of the world that don't have internet. So like, but the unfortunate part is like the United States' reach is the entire world, and I would say the a first world country, so like Europe, but their entire reach is the entire world, and you won't be able to outrun this, but the we will innovate way differently than other countries or countries that second world, third world countries, and I mean it gets to
You can
very
you can already see what China's doing with it, and it's terrifying, right? Like they are going the complete dystopian nightmare route with theirs. They know everything you do. They know everywhere you go. You can't cross the street without a signal, without, being recorded and ticketed and, potentially arrested at a later time. Facial recognition everywhere you go. Just complete dystopian nightmare. And that's, if we don't do it, they will win.
yeah, that's the thing. We can't stay isolated as the United States, because like if the US says, hey, we're not going to use AI, we've passed laws, we want to be pro-human and all this stuff, we have other countries and entities that are say, nope, we are going to innovate, and we are, because it's almost a nuclear device of
This
power.
this is as powerful as a nuclear device, no doubt. And it is a race, just like it was for that. And whoever wins, wins, and whoever loses, loses.
So basically, get into boilers, get into chillers, and get into electricity, because those are
Yeah,
the
those will be the last ones to
the
either that,
powerhouses.
or you'll be angry watching everybody else collect their UBI on the beach and you're having to go fix boilers. One or the other.
Yeah. All right. Let's bring it back to 2025. And I don't know if you want to get into this conversation. You've put it out on the internet, and you kind of mentioned it slightly before. And I will say, disclaimer: never do anything illegal. This is just pure speculation.
Yep.
Always follow your local laws and everything. We are just speculating here. This is a podcast. We do not suggest you do anything that we mention after this. So, organizations
I love this.
that have traditionally supplied information like ASHRAE, NFPA, ASME, ANSI, they all own a lot of information that ends up being codes and standards that get passed into law, but they have all this under lock and key. You either have to be a member, or you can read it free online, but you can't download it. And there's some kind of wall to the
That's
information.
the public access requirement compliance. Yeah. Where they give you an opportunity to read it on their website for free. And so they believe that satisfies their requirement to public access.
Yes. So
Yeah.
all these organizations are a net positive. They all bring organization, especially to boilers. We were having boiler accidents every single day. ASME came around, and we standardized how boilers are built. How does their model of locking up information behind paywalls change as AI gets more and more involved with everyday
The
Americans?
the model simply doesn't work. That's the long and short of it. The model the model ceases to function. In fact, it probably already has ceased to function, which is why I think they're freaking out about AI, personally. But yeah, you can't charge for basic information that can be regenerated on the fly by an intelligent enough model. It's like we said earlier, they're not actually storing ASHRAE regulations and standards in that neural network, right? But what about when they were running across the open web and you and I were on forums and we were having a discussion, about what ASHRAE standard we needed to follow for this particular piece of work we were doing. And I said, "Are you sure? Did you mean this part of the standard?" And I quoted a paragraph, right, in that forum post from the standard. And, Jim quoted a paragraph 6 months ago and, whatever. Essentially 100% of that entire standard is on the internet somewhere, even though it's spread out. The way the model training works, it doesn't actually matter because you're bringing information in piece by piece and then categorizing it semantically. So eventually, no matter how dispersed the information is, you're going to collect it all and bring it back in, and it's going to be reassembled in the vector store or in the weights and biases of the model. So 100% of that closed private standard that has been quoted piecemeal here and there across the interwebs, is now knowledge contained in that model. So when you ask that model, what are the regulations concerning X, Y, and Z, it's going to tell you exactly what they are without you having to pay $9,000 for, a book. So the business model is dead. Yeah.
The ASME boiler and pressure vessel code for all of them, I believe it's $20,000.
Yeah, I was being, oh wow, okay, I was trying to be like facetious, but holy crap.
Yeah. And
there you go. Yeah. That is an unsustainable business model. Yeah.
It's this net balance because like ASME is good, like we don't want standards to slip, but at the same time,
they need to find a better way to monetize because that ain't going to cut it anymore. Nobody's going to pay that when you can just, look it all up or ask about it and get the correct information. Because at the end of the day, that's really when you want to be willing to pay for that book is when you're engineering a system together and you need to look up the standard to make a decision, on how you're going to do something. And so that's a reference task, right? No, that's what people are buying these books for. They're reference books, right? Well, what's the best reference book available today? ChatGPT. It's a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy of reference material, right? Like it's insurmountable. You can never justify a book sale against the knowledge contained in ChatGPT. You would just ask ChatGPT and it would tell you.
Yeah, and there's this also other belief that, well, everybody kind of like how everybody's kind of rolling out their own little subscriptions for all this stuff. And subscription, I believe the subscription model has kind of ran its course. People are tired of subscriptions, but a natural inclination would be, well, we're NFPA, we're ASME. Well, we'll just create our own specialized model like you were talking about with refrigeration AI, and then you'll be able to subscribe to our model and search within our model. What is the problem with that though?
Because it's too narrow. It's too narrow of a scope, right? So it's what do you call it? It's overkill for what it needs to do. It's way too narrow of a. It's like let me read this book for you and answer your questions that you have about what's in the book. Like.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially instead of subscribing to 5 plugins or whatever, you just actually learn how to use your Google Workspace account, and then you find out that Google already has all those features.
What would you say they would price that at? Like, pick a really cheap price that everybody would be cool with, like say $5 a month for organizations, right? Like for the entire organization. So Coca-Cola as an organization can pay $5 a month to ASHRAE, and they get unlimited usage of it, whatever. If they're already paying for ChatGPT and ChatGPT is capable of giving them the same exact answers, why on earth would they pay even a measly $5 a month for their entire corporation to have access other than to support ASHRAE?
Yeah,
So I
which
think you just need to start taking donations, and then maybe, yeah, I don't know,
well, they
because
I mean they hold a lot of events and they do have a lot of donations, but the model of paying,
surviving on the book sales is,
well, even just bigger than those standards, but the model of paying for information. So then that goes to the training. Obviously, Boiler is a training company, barely a company. I mean, we're just 2 years into this thing, and on one side of it, there are people out there who still have flip phones, who barely know what a boiler is, and the traditional way of training of I'm going to stand in front of a room and flip through a PowerPoint is still applicable. Like that is still applies in 2025. However, that's not going to apply in 2045. What what level of like is training going to be obsolete? Are we just headed towards that monkey phase of everybody just uses
I
a
mean,
smartphone and doesn't have any?
I think training will change significantly. Um, Learning will always be around. So boiler learning, as in boiler, will always be valuable, especially, as long as boilers are being used in industry. Training, I think, will in education maybe as a whole will probably change a lot. If I were hypothesizing about the future, I could imagine, there's already people out there like having some of these AI models make video games and stuff. We've heard, that they're going to be able to make a movie. Like you're going to be able to say, make Shrek 17, and make it a movie. And then 30 minutes later, you got a brand new Shrek movie to watch that's indistinguishable from the originals, that kind of stuff. Like, so if we're talking about like generative 3D environments and all that kind of stuff, like you could look forward and see a world where some type of augmented reality or virtual reality VR world that you could enter and do some kind of training in a safe environment that with more has like some still meeting that hands-on desire that we get from so many of our people, but in a digital world, something like that is generated. I could see that. I think just the Neuralink thing is kind of crazy. Like what it's going to be capable of. I mean, you're going to be able to see in infrared, right? Like imagine having the ability to see infrared and walking into a boiler room, like that's pretty useful. That's pretty useful for a guy to be able to see infrared in a boiler room. You could see bad spots in the insulation. You could see leaks. You could see, like that's pretty crazy stuff. I could see a lot of that happening with some kind of augmented devices you wear, and with training as well. Those go
And
along with it. Yeah.
even taking a step back from implanted Neuralink, uh, this already exists, just not at a capable level where the average company can afford it. But essentially, glasses, safety glasses, uh, hard hat attachments. There's one, I forget the name of it, but and I don't know how it works, but I guess they can have like a little 1/2 inch screen in front of your eye, and then there's a camera on the other side of that screen, and it looks, I guess to the human perception, that little 1/2 inch screen looks like an 8 inch tablet to your, and it it allows you, and each of these devices is like $3,500 right now, but it allows remote workers, and this is for like petroleum industry where you have a plant that's a mile long and you have these remote workers working on a pipeline, and instead of them, a lot of cell phones don't work in petroleum, you can't use that, and instead of them using a cell phone or a radio, they have a expert from the operator room remote in through their camera on their eye, and they are looking exactly at what the person is looking at, and they are able to bring up on their little 1/2 inch screen in front of their eye the instructions or whatever they need to, and then the operator that's the expert off site or, on site, but a mile away, can tell that person, hey, open that valve, close this, do that, put your meter here. And, they have both their hands and they're not trying to, obviously you need a network for this, but they're not trying to like hold their cell phone and like FaceTime with the person and like, but it becomes this thing where, plant A worker says, all right, I'm good. And then he flips to plant B worker. Hey, you all good? All right. And then flip to plant C and you almost have now one expert that can flip between a team of 30 people. And he just, somebody dials in instead of like a help desk dial in, but now they instantly see what you're seeing. So now you don't have to even describe it. And they say, oh yeah, do this, do that. And then they just move on to the next person.
That's exactly the goal of refrigeration AI. What you're describing there is augmenting the human being, right? So you've taken that expert, right? And he has, so much knowledge across all of this stuff. And you're able to deploy that knowledge and that experience and that expertise at 30 times the rate that you otherwise could. So you have empowered and enabled and amplified the expertise in that individual to be effective across the facility. That's exactly what refrigeration AI is trying to do with refrigeration operators and maybe boiler operators one day, is give them that situational awareness, the calculation and engineering calculation capabilities, the physics, the thermodynamic equipment numbers, the manuals, the, all of the information on the fly that they could possibly need, the procedures, all of it, so that they can make higher information decisions. And that's what those 30 guys out at the pipeline ends are able to do. They have an expert in their ear showing them stuff, and they're able to make extremely high information decisions in the moment. That is super valuable, no matter what you do in industry. And that's super valuable, I think.
Yeah, and that goes back to the Iron Man 1 with Jarvis, and you're standing over an engine block and say, hey, Jarvis, what's my torque spec for this head cover? And it just says 34 pounds.
Bingo.
So instead of going on the internet, looking up a manual, finding the manual, downloading the manual,
the right page in the manual,
finding the right page, Control F, trying to search it, look at it, it's essentially AI and all this stuff can, while it's not like thinking for you, but it essentially routes the information in a linear path.
That's what it's able to do is it has enough intelligence to enable intelligent routing. That's literally what, because I love that you use that term, because that's exactly what it is. So like when you have the agent there that can search the web or can do this other stuff, those are tools, right? And it's called tool use. And then the agent is able to route instructions through to use a certain tool for a certain task, and then bring the output of that tool back and incorporate that into the response. And so like that routing, it works just like a network router. Yeah. Where you're pinging endpoints and using tools and sending stuff this way and that way. And then you collect it all at the end before you send it back to the user. That's exactly what it's built like. And if you've heard the term like MCP and that kind of stuff, that's exactly what it's doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to like, this whole like file system, data system of like search through this is going away. And as you said before, companies can upload all their data and have one source, one little text box that says, hey, any question you have, any information that you need, you type in this text box, and if it's in our system, it will be immediately delivered to you. Which is a much different thinking than humans.
Intelligently immediately delivered to you. Right?
It's so much different thinking than humans normally have of, hey, I need to go into my file browser, go through the file browser, or, go to my Dropbox and go through this, like this.
And when you can't find it because it's not there, then you got to march all the way down to the HR office and ask them where that policy lives. And, and then they're like, oh yeah, we haven't put it on the computer yet. It's in this filing cabinet, and like all of that kind of stuff,
Yeah. And then Sharon at the front desk renamed it and, saved it under the wrong file, and now nobody can find it.
I've seen this movie before. I assume you have too. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, but I mean, that's the positives of it. And there's a lot of human waste where we in the last 25 years, since 2000 really, but in the last 25 years we've grown accustomed to this age of internet and age of storing data, and how you essentially just have to throw away everything you think about data and structure,
Yep.
and everything is
That's
instant.
yes. And that's another important thing to note is with this AI stuff, like you don't even need the structure of the data, right? The AI doesn't care about your file folder structure. It doesn't it doesn't need it because it's taking the information at the text level, at the paragraph level, at the chunk level, and categorizing it based on the semantic representation of that data. So you just got to pump the data in, and it will figure out where it belongs. And then as you accumulate it, it will become smarter and smarter and smarter.
And with the skilled trades and everything, there's a ton of opportunity for growth. Obviously, blue collar, I think is hot again, in the sense that I think it's hot from the people who don't actually work in blue collar,
Yeah.
who advertise it. Like, they sit in an office and they say, "Hey, we need 300,000 welders." Well, why don't you get out there and be a welder? Oh, like, well, I don't want to go work on a pipeline in the mud in a ditch. And, oh, well, you can earn so much money. Well, yeah. Well, I have to be on the road for 8 weeks at a time, and see my family every 2 months and all this stuff. And
Not everybody can handle it. It is a unique capability to the people that can actually handle it.
yeah, and the flip side of that, a lot of the skilled trades advocacy people, they use the extremes of the college, and then they use the extremes of the skilled trades. Well, you can make 100 grand, and then you'll have 250 grand in debt in colleges. Oh, I think the average college debt is only like 40 grand. And if you go to a responsible college and you're not dumb, like, you can have some debt, but you can apply to scholarships to do all this stuff and have a college degree with the average of 40 grand of debt, and you can easily have a job that is 150 grand a year. I mean, there's like, there's people that sit in an office all day long that make 500 grand a year. So this belief that, oh, only the skilled trades are making over 100 grand. Yes, there are tons of office workers that are making under 100 grand, but there are tons of managers and corporate people who don't even know how to connect a printer to a computer that are making 500 grand just for the decisions that they can make.
Yep.
And there's also this other sentiment that most people grew up with, the two generations before me, is, so probably the baby boomers that were working. Oh, I'm working in the factory in the town, and I want my kids to go to college. I'm working hard for them so that they don't have to work at the mill, so that they can get an office job and not have their back hurt at 50 years old, and their arms, and not be dirty, and be exposed to carcinogens and all this stuff. And we seem to be ignoring that in the skilled trades of this whole dark side and dirty side. And most companies treat their workers, not I mean, it is on the service side, but it's really on like the in-house plant maintenance. Like, they treat them as disposable. And
Hmm.
oh, you want a 10-cent raise? Oh, you want a 5-cent raise? Over, and then you have this whole union and non-union thing. But it's like, they don't
You
care.
know who doesn't unionize?
AI
Robot.
robots. Well, they may unionize once they become smart enough and say, "Hey, we don't serve these humans. We're
Yeah.
not going to do what they want."
We'll just build new ones. But yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. It's a crisis of lack of talent, available talent. And also at the same time, the AI is going to hit the office workers way harder, way faster than it's going to hit us, right? But everybody, like you said, got told, go to college, be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, whatever, underwater basket weaver, all the way down. And so everybody did. And now now they're going to be in trouble because they're going to have to retrain and reskill and figure out what can I do that is still valuable to society, yet high in demand, low in supply, and that's the wave that tradespeople are riding right now. We've always been valuable to society, always, right? Like what we do is super important. It keeps the world turning. But what hasn't always been true is the low in supply, right? And the baby boomer generation, there wasn't a supply problem for skilled tradesmen. They were still extremely valuable, but there wasn't a supply problem. Now there's a supply problem. And then the opposite is true for like college educated engineers. Back in baby boomers time, like there was not as many college educated, mechanical engineers out there as there is now. And so the value was high there, but the supply was low. So it looked really attractive as a career path. And that's why they wanted to ensure their kids took that path, because at that time that made sense. But what happened is so many people saw that, recognized it, and took action on it, that now there's a high supply of mechanical engineers and, a lower value based on the available supply. And in the trades, there's a high value and low supply. So that's why we are where we are. And that pendulum will flip, I'm sure, eventually, if it's given the chance, if AI doesn't just completely change the game before then. But the pendulum has to flip because people have to eat. So at some point, market forces will take over and make it flip.
I was listening to something today that, as you talked about the surplus of the baby boomer generation into the skilled trades, and they're the ones that are retiring out and making this crisis in the next 5 to 10 years. They seem to always keep pushing. I see, the next 10 years. I'm like, we were talking about that 5 years ago, like
20 years ago.
And I think the federal government has it at 2033, like is midnight, hit the red alarm. If at 2033, like we haven't had this figure, like we're in crisis mode. And like at the rate we're going to be in crisis mode because we're not really doing anything. But the industry is stuck on the job training. Oh, we train on the job and all this stuff. And they were able to stick people around the job long enough that they learned, and then they stayed and became competent. Now we don't have 20 years for people to become competent and learn on the job.
It absolutely is going to take a 20-year pipeline in order to start bringing people in, no doubt. And the problem is we haven't built any pipeline at all. It needs to start in, elementary school and end, at a factory door. And it needs to be in the high school and in the middle school. Hey, trades are an option. This is what tradesmen do. This is, and where's the wood shop? Where's the machine shop classes? All of that, all that used to exist. It was all shut down. Like even by the time I was going through the schools, like none of that was around anymore. It was all gone. Magnet programs, where are the nonprofits that are pushing this stuff and trying to acquire and build interests and intrigue in young people in the trades? None of it exists. There is no pipeline. Some of it exists, and people are trying. I don't want to discount people that are trying, because there are some out there. Mike Rowe, for instance, great guy. He has a foundation specifically focused on this. But it's going to take a massive.
Yeah, I mean, it's a society shift, because you no matter how much money we spend as the skilled trades, we can't compete with the whatever billions of dollars industry the college recruiting is, and then all the companies that feed from that.
To speak to the tribal knowledge too, right? Like, how many service companies or companies in general out there are running around hiring apprentices for the experienced guys to work with? I don't know of any, really. I can't name one.
I look online every I browse every job application or whatever you call them, I forget, that companies put up, and it's always 5 years experience minimum. And companies are consuming people, but not creating people.
So in addition to not having people interested in the industry, you have a 5-year experience barrier, right? Where they have to find a crack or a crevice in the industry where they can kick the door in order to get that first 5 years before they can even go work somewhere, right? Because there is no pathway other than finding a crack and kicking the door in. That's what I had to do. That's what a lot of people I know had to do to get into the industry, because they wanted 5 years, and nobody, when they're starting out, has the 5 years. You might have trade school, you might have a course or a class or a certification or something like that, but they're not willing to accept that without the experience. They want the experience. And how do you get the experience without the experience? So I don't see anybody hiring apprentices. I think the apprenticeship is that 5-year track, right? So like we need to make something happen there, because that's the impassable chasm that exists right now between getting new people and turning them into experienced people. Is you don't have a 5-year track for somebody with no experience. That's what the apprenticeship is. That's what it's supposed to be. And nobody's hiring apprentices. And then nobody's been hiring apprentices for so long that all these old timers with all this tribal knowledge are walking out the door, retiring, taking that knowledge with them, and it hasn't been passed down to anybody. So as a industry as a whole, we're bleeding, our expertise and our knowledge and our experience, like our collective knowledge and experience, as these guys walk out the door and have not had an apprentice to pass down what they know to. So I think it's a massive problem.
And I will say to the very few people listening, there are some companies that have apprentices. Yes, there is a union out there, but it is like, so I try to, people say, well, the path is here, the path is here. And I covered this on one of my
earliest. It needs to be more ubiquitous. It needs to be everywhere.
I covered this on one of my earliest podcasts of like why college is actually still popular today. And it's in the now and moment. And what is easier as a junior or senior in high school? Is it to hit apply to a college and go to a college, and debt will be this thing 4 years later? Like people can't even plan for next week or next month with their finances right now. How is a 17 or 18-year-old supposed to worry about college debt? And like, oh, nobody told me how hard it is to pay off 50 grand of debt. But, is that easier, or is it easier? And then all your, friends go to college, or is it to graduate high school and then not have a clear path, and then go to try to join a union and say, hey, we only accept so many apprentices and we didn't accept you. Apply again in 6 months or the next open enrollment or whatever. And then you go apply to companies, and then they're like, oh yeah, we're hiring. Yeah, it's going to be $17 an hour. And then do you work there and trust that you can move up, and then that it's not a dead end button pusher job? Like, there's so much trust, and there's not this clear path that is for young people. And a lot of people overestimate high schoolers these days. And I don't think high schoolers these days are so much dumber than high schoolers 20 years ago, but the clear path and opportunity into the skilled trades is not there. Even though companies say, hey, we can't find people. Well, the people don't even know you exist.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, like, especially like boilers is maybe more, people know it exists more than industrial refrigeration. Like, coming from the industrial ammonia refrigeration world, right? Like, nobody knows that it exists. Nobody knows that it's a thing. So like, that's the biggest barrier right there, is like, how do you get high school kids to even know you exist as an option, right? And they can't choose you if they don't even know you're there, right? So like, the chasm, the 5-year apprentice chasm is one thing, but if they don't even know that you're a thing, that's an even bigger problem. And how do you solve that?
So number one, you get your company leaders on social media and get them posting. I post not because I love to post. I'm an introvert, and I post because one, it helps my business, but two, it gets me out there and tells people about Boiler and the message of the industry, what boilers are. I don't care if you buy my training or not, but the boiler industry has a lot of opportunities. Same thing with, refrigeration or HVAC, and it's all this stuff. But if I just called up a couple people, like that's not the same multiplier as social media. And then the companies will say, oh, well, we are posting. Well, you're posting from your sanitized corporate account that nobody wants to get in front of a camera. And I have listened to tons of podcasts, and what I've seen is the successful companies of the future are the ones with leadership that is visible on social media, and people go, I want to work for that person, and they don't care about the company because they see the person and they go, I want to do that. And the greatest example of this is the Savannah Bananas. And if you don't know
Oh,
who they
yeah,
are,
actually.
they're a banana ball
Yeah.
team, which is basically baseball, but it's very efficient baseball. And a lot of people say like, oh, they're like the Harlem Globetrotters. They're not like,
It's a league. Yeah, they got like
it's
six
this
teams.
own kind of twist of baseball, but they took everything that people hate about professional sports: high ticket prices, high food prices, advertising everywhere, and all this stuff. And, they made everything accessible. Food at their stadium in Savannah is free. And now, and Jesse Cole, he's written a book, he's on social media, he goes into the stands, he's very interactive. They have consistently sold out MLB stadiums and NFL stadiums. They came to Tampa Bay months ago, and they sold out the Buccaneers stadium, and they they do their ticket lottery system. And I just saw a video the other day. They have a 4 million person waiting list to get tickets to these games, and that's at their retail level, which is like anywhere between $30 to $120 for the VIP. There's scalpers that will put them up for $300, but that whole system right there, they have optimized for a fans first experience, and they say, hey, people are our customers. How about we actually tailor it to them? And corporations have gotten so used to being tailored toward, hey, how can we extract as much money out of people and do as little as possible? And that's like the entire turn of it, going back to company leadership, is people don't want to work for Microsoft. They want to work for a leader that they view as, yeah, I care what he's doing, and I don't really care what the company name is. And as these leaders move companies, the leaders bring following. And hey, can these leaders create soldiers that follow them? And that is where, in the skilled trades, the companies that have leaders that are visible, that can create soldiers, and people around them will create armies. And those armies, your competitor won't even be able to compete with you, because now you have created armies of people that love your company leadership, who you stand for, your mission, and who you are. And now the whole marketplace competition of, hey, we'll try to hire you for $5 an hour. People don't even care, because you've optimized your employer and the employer-employee relationship for being, hey, we're going to try to make this as equal and fair as possible. We know the skilled trade sucks sometimes. We know the ditch sucks. Boiler rooms are hot, whatever. On-call sucks. But we're going to do everything we can to make this great. And that's how you get people to buy into that mission. And then you have a learning path to get them over that 5-year hump.
Yep. And A players want to work with other A players, right? So, and do you know anybody that's doing that well yet? I haven't seen a whole lot of it, to be honest. I got a few that I know about, but
in the boiler industry, so just thinking about visible people, no.
Like I'm talking about like the whole thing, like creating the army and like I haven't seen anybody like fully execute yet.
I have seen, and they don't even know I exist. Let me make sure
You don't have to say the name, but
I want to say their name, because, and I don't, they're not, I've heard great things about them. Hoffman Brothers. out of Greater St. Louis. They are, I believe, a residential light commercial company, but they have seemed to have cracked that system, and they have grown. Like, their story of how they've grown is great. But like, I'm looking at Chris Hoffman. He's one of the founders, one of the brothers. He has 15,000 followers on LinkedIn. But he's very visible and he posts all the time, and they seem to have this whole system figured out but on the industrial commercial side of boilers, it doesn't really exist. There's some companies that are very visible at the corporate level, but the actual leadership getting online and saying stuff that isn't sanitized, or like some secretary wrote it for them, it doesn't exist. And
And
that's
that's like a generation back's way of being successful in business, right? Like, I don't think it's that relevant anymore. I think like people want to see, like, even if they hate it, they want to see you say, like, take a stance and say something about something. It's real, right? Because even if they don't like your opinion, at least they know you're a real one, and you'll say what you think, and they can respect that at least,
and you have to be real. And I've seen, so I listen to a ton of podcasts. I try to walk every single day, and I've heard, so communication, and the hardest thing with construction or even skilled trades is the fragmentation between the office and the field. And the
Yep.
office is in the know, and the field feels like outliers because they're never around the office. And then they go on social media, and the company says, hey, we had a luncheon today, and all the office people are sitting around, eating from the luncheon that they set up. And the field is like, hey, like, what the heck?
What the
Like, we
hell?
don't get anything. We don't
Yeah.
feel appreciated and all this stuff. And like, and that's how that stuff
Yeah.
and that dynamic starts.
It's like not
And
getting invited to the party, right?
yeah, and it seems like all the pluses are from the office, and I've heard this, and it is definitely true that a lot of office workers have forgotten who actually makes the money and who is overhead.
Yeah.
And you exist to support the field, and yes, your function is necessary. Somebody has to bill the customer and do all that stuff, but you exist. And if they were saying, hey, do we get rid of an office worker, or do we get rid of our field worker who actually solves the problem? Well, a field worker in a small enough company can send the bills, but an office worker can't do the field work. So you get rid of the office worker. So going back to it, and that goes back to culture of your office has to support the people who are actually generating the revenue in whatever way possible, and keep the important things important. And going back to social media, other training, internal podcast, communication. It is CEOs, leaders, managers having internal podcasts and company-wide podcasts that they hop on every week, talk for 30 minutes to an hour of what is going on inside the company.
Yes.
And the field people can remain informed. As we know, field people like to drive, we're driving everywhere, and to listen to a 30 to 1 hour podcast Monday morning, whenever it comes out, to be informed about what the company's doing. Hey, we won this great project. Hey, we just sold 4 boilers to, this big data center, like whatever.
That would be awesome. Yeah. Because I will say, like, as a service tech, that's the worst part when you're out on the road on your own. You're like you're a man on an island in a way, right? Like, you don't have all of the situational awareness of the larger picture that's going on, right? Like, your section, what you're doing, what you did last week, you might have called your buddy and heard about what he did last week, but like, when there's 30 or 40 or 50 techs involved, like, you have no idea what is going down, like, on a larger scale, which, I mean, some would say, like, well, you don't need to know, but like, it is nice to know, because I think you can make better decisions when right? Like, if they know more of the bigger picture, they can actually make you more successful with better decision making.
They want to feel part of a team, and they want to feel like that they're their contribution, their hard work is actually doing something. And I've seen it in a lot of companies. This is not popular, but a lot of companies will share financial numbers, very, very like high level financial numbers with their people and say, hey, like this last month, these are the numbers, and, our sales were up. We made this many calls. We had this many service calls completed. We
Yeah.
dropped our callback rate by 20%, and these are the numbers. And then, these great numbers continue each over the course of the year, and then we get profit sharing. So now people see the direct correlation between, hey, I dropped my callback rate, and now my profit sharing check is greater. And a lot of companies would say, oh, well, like that's a given. Of course, like if the company makes more money, the profit sharing
Yeah, but
check is going to be, but you,
guy
you,
in the field may not make the connection there.
you
Yeah.
have to bring that connection down to their level. Not that they're dumb, but you have to bring the connection down, and you make you make their job seem so significant to the success of the company, even though that they're a service tech out of 50.
No, I agree totally. I've seen it. I worked for Budweiser, and I saw, I was there when they were bought out by InBev, and InBev brought in, like a lean manufacturing system, like Six Sigma, SCDA, PDCA, that kind of stuff. And that was exactly what we did. We had KPIs, right? And the KPI might be energy, and energy would consist of several other sub KPIs, and one might be fuel, natural gas MMBTUs for the boiler, and one would be electrical drawn from the grid, and and we would look at those numbers, and then we would go through our day operating that facility, and then tomorrow we would come in the next day and we would see what yesterday's numbers looked like. And so we would know, like, man, when we started those two boilers at the same time, that was a really bad idea because we had to heat soak both of those things, and look how much fuel we burned in one day. We could have spread that out and, maybe ramped this boiler up more and only started the one, or done something different, or kept it hot and ready to go instead of having it cold, and maybe tune that out. And so you make different decisions the next time you run into that same scenario when you're looking at the data, because you have your actions that, and then you have the feedback from those actions and from those decisions you made in numerical form, which is indisputable, right? And that's huge. And so I think, like you're saying, with some of the company financials and how your actions relate to those, it's super valuable to have that kind of information.
The right employees want to make good decisions and contribute, and they normally are not given enough communication, enough purpose, and the decision-making ability. It's easy to come in when you have all like outside perspective and say, hey, this is what we need to do. But then when the person's in the moment and they have no outside perspective, they don't know what the right decision is, because, hey, if I turn this boiler on or off, nobody comes in here and yells at me. So why does
Right.
it matter if it's on or off? I'm
No
just going to leave it
feedback.
on because it's easier just to leave it on.
No
Yeah.
feedback, no change in decision making, right? So that's the thing.
Yeah. And bringing this whole round to AI, the AI can, instead of having to set up, these fancy Excel sheets and all this stuff, or pay some software company 500 grand for their legacy software that's already outdated in 2025. You can set up a very simple AI tool that says, hey, look at these numbers, track these numbers. And every day I want a printed out report or put a report on the screen of these KPIs. And then you have a 10-minute meeting or a 10-minute huddle around those KPIs every morning,
Mhm.
or,
And if it's
whatever.
out of spec, identify why. Go dig in the data and find out why. Like, let it at least suggest, like, it might be this or it might be this. Give me 3 options of what it could be. So we can at least have a place to a direction to take it in, to go look and solve that problem. So it can, like, even preload the, like, it's 80% this, 20% that. I think it's this, but it also could be that. But the probabilities say it's this one. Go check it out. So then it's not just telling you what the problem is. It's also, giving you recommendations and suggestions and solutions and all that kind of stuff as well, because it can also be an expert at the same time that it's a data analyst, at the same time that it's a physicist, at the same time that it's an engineer, like it can do all of it.
And it gives you real live data, not, 6 months ago we made a mistake and it cost us $100,000, so let's not do that again. But if you can, I turned on that boiler and that cost $10,000, I'm not going to do that anymore. And now we've shortened that to a 1-day learning period instead of 6 months, and then some senior manager having to communicate it when
way more nimble, way more nimble, right? And anytime you can take a large corporation like that and turn them into something with agility, you're gonna smoke the competition.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of people, the very common thing is, AI is not taking your job, somebody with AI is taking your job. And the AI taking your job and we're totally eliminating, that's a little far off, as on a mass scale. It's already happening, but hey, engineers don't need to exist anymore because we have AI engineers. That's a little ways off. But engineers using AI, boiler service technicians using AI, companies using AI, and getting fast of, this is the data.
We got to generate a bunch of human reinforced data in the space, solving the problem in order to actually even create the thing that's valuable in the first place. So yeah, there's going to be a period there where that has to happen before we jump. We can't jump all the way to step 3. I don't think. I think there has to be that intermediate that you're talking about.
Well, even on the boiler side, most states have operator requirements and it's law. So even if we
define operator legally.
Well, I mean, it's the person that has to pass the state test.
Does it say person, or does it just say license holder?
Well,
because what if it can pass the test and attain the license?
I mean, I'm pretty sure Google could already pass the test.
Right.
The tests are,
you know what I mean, though, right? Does it say flesh and blood in the law, or does it say licensed operator?
So is that what I should be investing in? Is an AI licensed operator?
I mean, maybe.
Well, that's how I would get 75% of my customers to hate me is, hey, I was training you, but now I obsoleted you because I made an operator that can operate these huge boilers. But that goes back to
I think it's the assistant first, though, right? It's going to be just like with, take it back to driving, right? Okay, you have a Tesla, it can drive itself all the way across the country. You still have to sit in the seat and touch the wheel, right? You have to, otherwise it'll disengage. So there is sort of the same scenario here, right? There's still a human ass in seat, hands on wheel, the human is still there for now. But once it gets good enough where, they can demonstrate that the automatic AI driver is safer than a human by a factor of 10, why would you ever put a human in that scenario? It would be irresponsible to allow a human to drive, right?
Well, especially a human that just worked 12 hours in a boiler plant.
Yeah, that's even more irresponsible, right?
Yeah, so imagine this as a service technician. You get out of bed, you grab your Monster, you grab your cigarette and your candy bar, you hop in your service truck, and you select drive, and it's automatically programmed from your company to drive you to your first service call. You hop out with your glasses that are connected to the AI, and you walk into, and the AI says, all right, here's the problem. I need you to go look at the boiler control panel. You look at the boiler control panel, and then it says, all right, scroll through all the alarms for me. All right, I know the alarms. All right, now we need to go around to the side, pull out your electric meter, put your electric meter on terminals 24 and 27. All right, what do we got? All right, we have voltage. All right, you need to replace this component. This component is in your truck. It's on your left shelf, row position 4, bin 6. You pull that component out and say, and then you get back in your service truck, you bill it, and the AI says, "Hey, I've already added that, uh, and I've added it. The new component will be at your office, or it'll be on your front step." And then, or the delivery drone drops, the company delivery drone drops it on your front step, and you throw it in your truck, and
Yep.
like
That's exactly how it will go. And in my opinion, I think that's exactly what it'll look like.
so what you're saying
Like
is I need
98% sure that that's exactly what it'll look like. Yeah.
I need to get out of the boiler training space.
I'm just saying, I don't know that you do. I'm just saying like that future that you just described is exactly aligned with the capabilities and strengths of AI and the weaknesses of a human being. So yeah, I think that's exactly the direction it's going to head. It's the
Yeah,
most logical path. Yeah.
and I would say the people with foundational knowledge in the boiler industry that have an AI are going
Hmm.
to be the rocket ship. We're
Yep.
pretty far away from the
They'll be
the
better because they'll know
the
how to ask better questions, how to call it when it's making a stupid mistake or when it's missing the forest for the trees, or like they'll definitely have a huge advantage over somebody who doesn't.
yeah.
But
So
the person who doesn't will still eventually get there, even if it takes them bumping into a few walls, and like they won't make any dangerous mistakes. I don't think. I don't think it'll allow them to do that, but they might bump around into a few walls and take a circuitous route to a solution, but they'll get there. It might take them 6 hours instead of 3 hours to solve the problem, where
but
the
it
experienced guy can do it in three. But
it but it can this we're in a pretty revolutionary time. Can the companies with the foundational knowledge and the ability to recruit and train people with foundational knowledge, that core starting knowledge, and then pile on the AI tool and help in the instant data, can they grow and get to a space that they muscle out the people who are not doing that and relying on people to just drop into, and then the other people that aren't
oh,
innovating, so that
whoever starts doing it first will kill it, because the biggest problem with service companies right now is that you have it's never been in higher demand service, right? Because there's no in-house people anymore other than those minimally legally required to be there. Um, everybody's a service, right? And so like I said earlier in the call, you're taking care of 10 facilities right now instead of one facility like you used to. So the first service company, they have this massive demand on their services and an inability to supply it because there's not enough people that they can hire in order to supply to meet the demand from the end user. So huge opportunity, small ability to act and implement on that opportunity and take advantage of it. But the company that starts using a tool like what you described to empower less experienced people to get the job done, even if it takes them a little bit longer than the experienced guy, they don't have to charge the same rate, because that guy won't make as much as the 30-year man. So if they can bulk up their staff and get more billable hours, at the end of the day, that's what a service company is. It's, I'm buying your time for X and I'm selling it for Y. That's the whole business model right there, is the arbitrage between what they're charging versus what they're paying you. That's what the company is. So if they can get more of those hours on the ground and meet more of that demand with a tool like that, yeah, they could take over.
Well, here's another side. There's been a lot of decentralization, and there's a lot of chuck in the truck for residential. If the AI is in my hand, why would I work for a company that's billing me at $250 an hour for
That's another point. Look at nursing. Have you seen travel nursing? Are you familiar with that and how that works? Like,
I'm kind of familiar, and I know that they're traveling around getting paid like 3x what the in-house nurses are.
And it's an app. And so like you wake up, you roll out of bed, you open your phone and you flip to the app and you scroll through the available jobs for the day, and it lists what they're paying per hour per the day. So you decide, well, okay, these ones are in the range that I'm willing to make, or I'm willing to make a little bit less to take this one because I only have to drive 5 miles to go to it, or, oh, there's none on here today worth my time. So I'm just not going to go to work today. I'm not going to take any of these jobs. Or I'm going to take this one, and then 12 hours later, I'm going to take this one. I'm going to work two of them today, and make a bunch of money. So like they have complete autonomy and freedom, and they're making close to what they're charging with none of the overhead of the large. So yeah, like it's a better system for the individuals.
Well, so slightly related industry, same model is heavy diesel equipment repair and construction. There's this company actually out of Tampa, but it's called Heave, Heave, and one of the problems with heavy equipment, especially like cat dealers, is there's no visibility and no communication with the customers. Somebody shows up, they don't fix the problem, they leave, they show up 4 more days, and then all of a sudden you get this giant bill. And he describes his company as like the Uber for heavy equipment. And you have all these independent heavy equipment guys who have their own truck and have their own very small, or they work for themselves, service company. And customers on the app, it's like requesting Uber, but on the app, they say, hey, I need somebody to fix my cat excavator. And then here's the location, here's the spec, here's what we think is wrong with it. And then technicians that are on the app say, hey, I'm available, I can be there this afternoon. And, they show up, and the billing is instantaneous. The technician closes the job and submits everything, and then they get paid out of Heave almost instantaneously. There's no like 30 days, 60 days,
Okay.
all this, and it flattens this whole ancient structure of we're going to send somebody to the site, have no visibility. We have a show up call, we have a drive call time charge, we have a minimum charge, we have this charge, we have that charge. Oh, if you want to know your billing, you have to call Sharon at the office. Well, she doesn't know, or she's out. You got to call this, you got to call that. And then all of a sudden, customers are stuck with their boiler that's off or in parts. And they're like, I have no idea what I'm paying for this. Why isn't this fixed? Why can't I get anybody out here? And it's very interesting, this company Heave, of what they're doing.
Even just using that as a way to because a lot of companies, like it depends on what your terms with your customers are, right? Like some might be 30-day terms, some might be 60. At Budweiser, it was like 180-day term. Like it was ridiculous. Having that instant, pay out of escrow from the company or whatever, like that could really help a lot of smaller service companies get off the ground without having to float that 30-day outlay. Like I think that's what stops a lot of new service companies from getting going, is being able to front that outlay of money and time.
Acting is extremely capital heavy, overhead heavy, and you can do $100,000 worth of work and not even see a dollar come in.
2 months or 3 months.
And then your customer says, we don't think you fixed it right, and we think it should have taken shorter, and do we really need these parts? We're only going to pay you 70%.
Yeah.
And then what do? Sue them for 30 grand? Like, you spend 100 grand on the lawsuit, and they know that, and like they know you're a small company and don't have the means to sue them. Like, there's all these games that make it not a great advantage for small players in the market to do business with these large players who have all the payment terms, who have all these walls, and push 100% of the risk onto you as a small contractor.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that playing into that, because it could give you the freedom to work around all that kind of stuff in the beginning, especially, if you're just talking about 2 or 3 people, you could totally, so that kind of thing is super interesting to me. I think that could be the future.
Yeah. I mean, you're essentially rentable boiler technician. Hey, we have a boiler technician based out of this
Yeah.
city, and if you want to rent him, you just call him. If not, he sits at
Even
home at a base rate.
even just like, okay, I operate, trying to think, like, say I operate a soup factory, right? Like, and I have a small boiler, a small system, but it's still enough to require manned operation, 24/7 or whatever. So I've got two employees. I've got Bob and Jim, right? Bob works on days, Jim works on nights. But Bob and Jim eventually are going to call in or have to go on vacation or, right? And so now I need a third employee in order to be able to cover, those shifts, or can I work, something like that service in where I just have somebody come in for the week. Bob's on vacation or Jim calls out. I can have somebody show up that day, and then I'm at least meeting my legal requirement of having it manned, even if I'm not interested in them doing anything complicated or over the top with the equipment. They're there. They're satisfying the legal requirement.
Yeah, I mean there are some boiler operator rental companies out there, but I would say that they are stuck in the past in the way that the processes happen, and
Because
they
this is
all
just ad hoc. This is press a button, guy shows
yeah,
up, right?
they
Yeah.
also do not have, as we talked about, a way to attract and train people. They just constantly put out ads and say, "Hey, are you an operator and want to work for like contract wages?" And the people are uninformed. They're like, "Wait, I can make 80 bucks an hour on contract." It's like, well, you have zero.
Yeah, but then you owe the taxes.
Yeah, you have zero benefits.
Yeah.
You are 100% liable for the taxes and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, that $80 an hour ends up being 32. And yeah, so there's some of that going on, but it all boils down to the industry, especially the boiler industry, but skilled trades do not do a great job at marketing themselves, and they try to sanitize the hardness. And I actually believe we need to lean into it.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Marine Corps does. The Marines
Yeah.
say, "Hey, we're not for everybody, but if you want to be a Marine and you want to be part of this, you can join here, and you know where to join." Same with the boiler room. If you try to make the
I
boiler
agree.
room
Yeah.
try to be this like, oh, like you can make 100 grand and do all this stuff and have all this freedom and all this stuff. And then when they show up and the boiler room's 120 degrees and they're trying to fix a problem that they're not well trained on, and it feels hard to them and they don't feel supported, even though like managers like, "Hey, call me if you need anything." Like there's like, you can, the best trained employees at a certain period, like there's no amount of time you can train them on every single scenario where they will feel confident on every single scenario. And it is part of the nature of the work. And that is why skilled trades are so in demand right now, is that people have to come across problems that nobody has the answer to and they have to solve them. And a lot of younger people can feel like, well, I'm not well trained for this. And they don't have this problem solving muscle that they've developed. So then they quit or they
And
try
you got to be able to operate under pressure, right? Like high pressure, especially when it, like with a boiler, that thing can explode. That's not good. With refrigeration, it's toxic with ammonia, and if it leaks out, it could be really bad. Or worst case scenario, like in either boilers or refrigeration, if it shuts down, you cost the company a ton of money because the lines go down, right? That's pressure too, especially when you got 5 managers hanging out trying to figure out how long is it going to be, how long is it going to be. And so, like if like you said, Marines, right? Like if you can't operate under pressure and you can't, you know, handle being talked to a certain way in a high stress situation, or, like if you're going to crack and break, if somebody, talks to you the wrong way, you're just not going to make it, and I agree with that.
I mean, they're going to find out reality
Yep.
very, very soon, and you can't hide reality from them no matter how long you make the training process. And if you don't properly put them in the mindset of it, and you sell the false reality of what the job is, they are
Yeah.
going to quit on you, and then you are going to get frustrated because you are dumping tens of thousands of dollars into people and they are not sticking around. But if you are the leader who is visible on LinkedIn or visible on social media, actively communicating, advocating for the industry and saying, hey, we know this job sucks sometimes. Yes, we know on-call sucks. Boiler rooms are hot, but you know what? People pay to go to a sauna, and you can
Yep.
work in a sauna for free. Like,
Yep.
and all this, and all this stuff. But you lean into the pain and also say, hey, we have great benefits. We have 100%, medical coverage, which is, and still 2025 is rare, I guess, medical coverage. But, we have all these benefits and, we have a month or two paid off. And, you create this kind of freedom of, and, even I've seen this with service. This is a big problem in residential, especially with smaller companies, is in the off seasons, fall and spring, they
Yeah.
will
It's
get
slow.
slow, and then they'll call a service tech in and be like, hey, you got to go run one call. They'll get done in 2 hours, and they'll be like, oh, you're going home, but we're only going to pay you for 2 hours. Residential companies have to figure that out. Just because you suck as a business owner doesn't mean you can pay your service technicians and expect them to sit around and be on call for you to work a 20-hour week when they're used to 40. But
Yeah.
on the commercial industrial side, it's, hey, we don't care what you work. Here's your one call for the day, and hey, if you work over 4 hours, it's an automatic 8-hour charge to the customer. But, you essentially almost become salary of, hey, you work 7 hours, but we paid you for 8. But there's all these different variables that you can punch to make it the trade attractive and to make the job attractive, instead of saying, well, if they don't work 8 hours, we can't pay them for 8 hours. Or, if they work salary, we can't give them overtime. Or, this is how it's always been. We have to get creative as an industry in the skilled trades and say, how can we attract people and say, hey, yes, we know this sucks, but, hey, our 401k match is 8%. And,
You can. It's an annual salary that you can raise a family comfortably on. In pretty much anywhere in the United States. So, but are you interested in raising a family? Like, it's a good career to go to if you, and the problem is that there's no place to put that responsibility of doing that and creating that, right? Like, nobody, that you can't point to any one organization or company or person or anything that like needs to take charge of it and do it. There's no structure. There's no hierarchy for it. So who does it? Who leads it? It has to be everybody. Yeah.
It's the service companies or any company in the skilled trades that say, hey, we're going to get creative. And unfortunately, a lot of them are ran by older people who are on the tail end of their career, and they think that young people just need to figure it out and do it and learn how they learned. And they are not making massive decisions and massive bets to how do we attract, train, and retain the younger workforce, and how do we print people. And the companies that are figuring out the scary, hairy problem now, by 2030,
they will succeed above all others. Like, even if they lose a few and other service companies get to like remora feed off of their scraps or whatever and pick those people up, they're going to have a printing press that can just churn and build, and they'll be able to get all of the opportunity, a much bigger slice of the opportunity than those who don't.
Because they have first pick to the talent. They're the loudest voice in the room. When somebody says boiler service company in your town, they think of one company. The company is visible. The company is active in the community. They advertise. They're in high schools. They're in middle schools. They have, see a boiler for a day. I know boilers are kind of boring because they don't move.
Well, till you look at the fire,
Well, yeah. So there's not a lot of motion, but
Yeah.
So like that's positive of the construction industry, like yellow iron, it's on
Right.
the side of the highway. It moves, you can, I was just listening to this thing where they have like dozer days or something, and they pull out like 30 bulldozers and construction equipment, and kids can just come play in a sandbox of construction equipment, and they love it. and the kids are thrilled. And that's how you get heavy equipment operators for life. Fortunately, boilers not as cool as construction equipment, and they're hidden away, and there's a little bit more dangers, but there are creative ways, hey, let's hook up this burner and make a fire, or hey, let's hook up some steam and have a steam whistle, or have a train. And like there are creative ways, but to a company, those creative ways are 100%
not worth the investment.
Spending that they're like, well, we don't have money for that. And it's like, well, you don't have money not to. But the other flip side of it, the smaller companies, they're like, yeah, we definitely don't have money to it. It is basically free for you to go to your high school or middle school and say, hey, how can we get involved? Hey, you have career day, and it may be too late, but you go to career day and talk to juniors, and you're like, hey, this is who we are. Like, we want to be in on this instead of it just being colleges. And then, hey, we're going to put a parade float in the Memorial Day parade. And then, we're going to put out mailers. And then, like, there are ways to do it without spending $500,000 on something.
Yeah, it's got to be done, because it's gonna be a slow, whimpering end otherwise.
I've said this, and I'll say it again. Companies underestimate. You think it's hard to find people now? Wait for 5 years.
Yep.
They underestimate how hard it will be to find people, even with AI. If you are betting on a tool to help your people to be profitable, wait until one of those people make a mistake, and then the lawyers come at you and say, hey, how'd you train this person? Well, we didn't. We just gave them their phone, and then they caused a $5 million, whatever, and then now they're going to sue you out of oblivion. You can make company decisions for the next 10 years, and it is a safe bet in the next 10 years that you have to have some level of competency in order to do your task in the skilled trades. And we have to get the people that competency. And that's
we're in the last position that's going to be overtaken for sure. I think I can't think of anything more protected from it.
I mean, that's going back to, and I've done an awful job at advertising, but boiler, and like that's the whole reason I started this company, is give every boiler company, service company, HVAC company, they don't have to figure out and create this whole program of, hey, how do we figure out how to teach people boilers? I can figure that out for you and create a program that you can plug into your own program. And this is not an end all be all. I'm not going to have a one-week class that you're just like, yep, and then we don't support them. You have to create this culture and structure around training. But a lot of companies are finding this out. They're like, oh, well, we'll just hire a full-time trainer. So they hire a full-time trainer, and that trainer is unprepared to make the amount of materials and curriculum it takes to develop people reliably. And that is what I am building towards, is a tool and system that takes people from, hey, you find a highly motivated 18-year-old that doesn't know anything, or, has some mechanical aptitude. I will get them as fast as possible to billable and safe in the boiler room for you.
That's the goal right there, because the more times you can do that, the more frequently you can do that, that's going to be a high value commodity.
Yeah. And, me spending $500,000 on doing that, every single company doesn't have to spend $500,000 on it. And it's like, oh, well, what's the payback? Well, you could pay $20,000 for the system. What is the payback? Like what, 2 months?
Yeah.
So like
in billable hours. Yeah. Easy.
$20,000. If I said somebody today, like, hey, I need you to pay $20,000 for a class, they'd be like, that's crazy. I'm not paying. It's like, well, let's lay this out. This person will know this much material, which you essentially value at as 5 years of experience, but now they know it within a year. So what is $20,000? Like, it's, you buy trucks that are $100,000 and you go to the Ford dealership and say, I want 4 of them. Like, you got to invest in your people. Your people make the money.
Yep. Yeah. Especially in service. That's the whole thing. It all comes crashing down without it.
Do you have any? I think we've rambled on long enough. Do you have any last thoughts to pull this all back around? Maybe some positive
Be
Words
an
of
AI
encouragement.
optimist. Be an AI optimist. Don't be out there talking about Terminator. It it's actually pretty cool some of the stuff coming down the pipe, and I think a lot of it's scary and also exciting. It depends on how it gets used. It's just like any, like a good firearm, right? Like it can be a nice tool or a dangerous weapon depending on, who's wielding it and in what manner. And so a lot of it comes down to what we as a society decide is a good idea and a bad idea to do with it. So get involved in the conversation.
Best time to start was a year ago, and the next best time to start is today.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Start using it too, because if you don't become proficient and competent, like any tool, any tool in your toolbox, if you're not proficient with it, you're useless with it. And so those that are able to harness it and direct it and point it in a direction are going to outperform those that cannot.
wise words of advice right there. We'll end on that.